The Lowcountry Livability PAC endorsed several candidates for Charleston City Council, and many of those candidates went on to become elected officials. I sit down one-on-one with somebody who was involved with the PAC, Dana Beach, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen later on iHeartRadio. Dana Beach, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. It's been too long, Quintin. Thank you.
There's been a lot going on.
Oh, gosh.
From me being called a Democrat to me being involved with the Livability PAC, I guess I got some power around here.
You do, yeah. You know when they start shooting at you, you're making a difference.
Yeah, and I'm not getting any questions from Sandy Sin in this interview, right?
No. Let me see if I can think of it.
And by the way, she's banned from Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, you know, you're doing a great service, really, bringing these issues up.
Thank you greatly. Yeah. And speaking of issues, I got to go back over to what Ryan Hicks of the Post and Courier said recently, and it's a column he wrote in the Post and Courier. It says this: candidates take note. The Livability PAC is here to stay. Let me read a couple of the paragraphs in that particular column. It reads this: come January, Charleston will have a decidedly different city council, slightly more progressive, a little more female, and a whole lot younger, and probably significantly more receptive to Mayor John Teckleburg's agenda. Obviously, you were a part of the Livability PAC.
Right.
What is the mayor's agenda now that he has mostly all these people in place?
Well, I think everyone agrees that the top priority, certainly I don't think anyone would say it's not in the top three, but most people, number one, is dealing with the flooding problem. And that is really as simple as mobilizing a lot of money. And what has not happened over the past 4 years is that we've not been able to obtain any new sources of funding. There's a little accommodations and hospitality tax maybe for a few years, but it's pretty much inconsequential when you look at the scope of the problem. And so the reality of that problem is that the council is really going to have to work together like they have not in the past 4 years. And I think they will. I think this new council will do that. They certainly have the inclination, capacity, and focus to do it.
And let me talk about the new council, because obviously there's 4 people coming in. Marie Del Troppo, who was not endorsed by the PAC, but she's going to be representing District 1, which is mostly downtown here in parts of Daniel Island. Then, of course, you have Carl Brady, which represents, out of West Ashley and Johns Island. Right. He's replacing Marvin Wagner. Then also you have, obviously, Ross Appel, District 10, right. West Ashley. He's coming in to replace Bill Moody. And then, of course, you have Jason Sackman, who just won the runoff a week ago.
25 votes.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you look back at the election to right now, what is still playing in your mind?
Well, I am just as optimistic about the next few years as I've been in decades. And I think we've got a council that is going to work together sincerely to try to deal with big problems. And what we're going to have, these are seismic challenges we've got. And I think what happens with councils that aren't sort of on the same wavelength is that not bad things happen. Nothing bad really happened. Nothing happens, and they become debating societies. People grandstand, they stand on their soapboxes, and that's what we saw for 4 years. And now I think we're going to see a lot less of that and a lot more collaboration. And these problems will not be solved without everybody pitching in, and that includes the West Ashley representatives, James Island, Johns Island, and Daniel Island and the Peninsula. We've all got to pitch in and solve the problems and understand there's slightly different focuses, but everybody has a common interest in moving this agenda forward.
And I forgot to mention Kristen King, who ran up against Keith Waring for District 7, I believe, for City Council. Obviously, Keith Waring got back in. When you look at those incumbents, most of them who lost, because of, I guess what happened with the Livability PAC and obviously people voting, are there incumbents that if you could go back, some of those incumbents you would actually endorse now if you could?
Well, of course, Peter Shea won.
Oh,
He was the only incumbent who retained his seat, and a few, Gary White stepped down to run for mayor. But I think we had some good, solid people, including Jason's opponent,
right.
who were good people in a time that really there were fewer maybe crises to be dealt with, and now we're in a new era where we've got to move things forward faster and bigger than before. But I don't think the incumbents. I think they really weren't up to the challenges that we're facing today, and that's really the message the voters sent. It seems to me that, as I said in the paper and talked to Brian about, there was a sense of frustration and anxiety, but it wasn't clear to anybody really what the solution was. And fortunately, so much of this is circumstantial. I'd love to say the PAC made the difference, and I think we made a big difference. But I think the bigger picture is just at some point there were fortunate circumstances where we had good candidates stepping up to run. We had an electorate that was concerned and upset, and willing to say we need a new slate, and we ended up with now a council that can change the world and for the better. So a lot of things have to line up, I've talked to people who said, well, why didn't we do this earlier, with the PAC? And I think it's because sometimes it's just not the right time. You don't have the level of receptivity that we have now. Part of it is people are really concerned. They drive into the city, for example. They drive around Lockwood. In 70 days this year, we've had a foot or two of water in the low parts of the city, not only on Lockwood and downtown, but also up on Morrison,
right.
And also up on the west side. And so, then on top of that, of course, we've got the problems out in the Church Creek Basin.
Sure.
And Johns Island, we're building into, we were, and we can stop this, but we were building into areas that flood that we weren't already there. So that's the irony of it. On the one hand, we've got this vast discussion going on about how to solve the flooding problem, but we're letting people build in low areas literally during the conversation instead of just saying, stop. If you're in an area that is low, that might flood, that isn't clearly appropriate, then we shouldn't be building there.
But then some people might be watching this saying, well, hey, weren't some of those incumbents who actually lost were pro-livability people?
They were, and I wouldn't say anybody was anti-livability. I think what we really were looking for was action.
Okay.
That was the thing. It wasn't even, again, it wasn't, although I will say there were a few council members, whose names I won't mention, who voted consistently against, for example, doing things downtown. For example, I'll give you one example, against the bike lane and against the bicycle bridge investment that will need to be made. The beauty of that right now is with Charleston Moves and my friend and my hero, Katie Zimmerman, we now have $18 million that will be deployed to build a standalone bike bridge, which will completely open up West Ashley for bicycling. But we're going to need more money. We'll need $5 million. And there's some council members who got voted out of office who wouldn't have supported that. So now I think we'll see that kind of thing move forward.
Now, also, with the bike lane and the $5 million you need, there's some people might be saying, hey, shouldn't that go towards the low battery of combating flooding?
Well, that's the beauty of the beauty of our challenge as a city is that we have these multiple needs. And on the flooding side, I would just make the point that if we're looking at $2 billion to do the projects that need to be done. the bike lane at 5 million literally in a drop in the bucket. I mean, we're going to have to make some very big changes in how we approach funding sources, and I've got a couple of ideas about how to do that. But the bike lane is something in a way almost, besides being very functional, it's something that says, it should say to us and it should say to the rest of the country, we are moving away from a system that requires every trip to be made in a car. We're going to accommodate people who would prefer to ride a bike and thereby be more responsible to the environment and more responsible to the survival of our city, because the less carbon we put in the atmosphere, the more sustainable downtown will be. And I know you took a bus over here, so that was a very important thing to do. And we ought to have a better bus system. That's another thing. We've been sitting around, frankly, without aggressively pursuing the bus rapid transit that needs to be pursued. And the city and the county play a role in that. You know, it's not, there was some finger pointing, well, that's the county's project, or that's the city's project. That's not what leaders do. They don't point fingers. They say, it is my job to be here to represent my constituents, and whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it, including moving the money that we already approved, $200 million, into rapid deployment on the bus rapid transit, into rapid deployment on the bicycle lane. This is not smoke and mirrors and hand waving. It's getting things done, and that's all that we want, that we elect these people to do. We don't need somebody else talking to us and giving a philosophy of something. We need them to do stuff.
Now, you have your candidates in place as far as being on council now that they've been elected. How can the votes be controlled now after you all essentially didn't endorse the mayor?
Well, I think Mayor Tecklenburg certainly wanted and said he wanted to move this entire agenda forward, and played a big role in the bike bridge, for example. As you know, he weighed in on that with Representative Cunningham.
Sure.
And I think his agenda lines up with the endorsed candidates. I also think, and the reason we didn't endorse him that is that so did Mike Seekings. And I think if you look at the vote yesterday on the 75% override for planning commission,
right,
you know, which is sort of inside baseball, but basically the city council voted to eliminate this requirement that there be a 75% vote to override a planning commission recommendation, which is a good idea. I think we can live with less, but it would, and also, by the way, the new council can change it back if they want to. But the point is that both Mike Seekings and John Tecklenburg voted to retain that, and I think that reflects a congruence of interest and focus that frankly made it somewhat difficult to decide who was the better of the two candidates.
These new council members, and obviously Marie Del Chop, who's coming in as a city councilwoman for District 1, do you believe they know the depth and history of our city right now in your mind?
I don't think anybody does. I think one thing that I tell you just on that point, and speaking of history, there's a wonderful new book coming out this spring by Ms. Butler, and I would say Nick Butler's wife, who's embarrassed to say,
Christine
Butler, yeah, and because I've read the draft of it, about how the city got where it is. I mean, how did it moved from being, let's just say, 250 acres below Calhoun to 450 acres, and a lot of it was filled. It was filled land, and that's where the flooding happened. So the council members will have to learn that, the ones who don't know it, and understand historically why things happen now the way they do. I noticed in the paper today there was an article about the affordable housing that's going to be put on the bridge alignment, and we absolutely must have affordable housing. frankly, I'm stunned that that's where it's going to go. And I think and I know there's a shortage of land, and I know all of that, but we're putting it in the creek, a former creek bed. The creek was called Vardell Creek, and so they will be putting giant tanks underground to retain the rainwater.
Okay.
The better way to do it is to put it in a better place, in my opinion. And I'm sort of the Monday morning quarterback because I haven't been involved with that. So I would say that with all due respect to Don Cameron, who's done a wonderful job over the years. But I just think it's unbelievable, frankly, that we're going to be building affordable housing in a creek bed.
Now, the Livability PAC, when you look still back at the election to right now, what was the strategy?
Well, it was pretty simple. We worked, and we all, and I say we, I mean the Preservation Society, Historic Charleston, the Conservation League, all the organizations, the neighborhood associations, to try to get Charleston Moves, to get these initiatives going. And my friend William Hamilton is in my view, one of the great civic activists of our time. Trying to get the bus system up and going and running better. I mean, not only the new bus rapid transit, but also just have a better, more predictable, more reliable bus system downtown. We need it, even absent the bus rapid transit system, because the one we have is an embarrassment.
Okay.
I mean, you go out Morrison Drive and you see the bus stops are in 2-foot high grass on the side of a busy road with no shade and no bench for anybody to sit on. It's pathetic. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, I'm getting off track, but basically to say, I think we all came to the conclusion from different perspectives, whether we were worried about cruise ship pollution, which I am, or whether we worried about biking, or whether we worried about drainage or mass transit, that things were not moving along. They were not being advanced. So that's the first point. The current city council wasn't getting it done. The current city council, I'm speaking, 2 weeks ago, and the current mayor were not accomplishing anything. I mean, there was very little being accomplished. Now, each of the candidates who was incumbent would have argued with that, but I think if you just look at it across the board, you'll see that there's very little being done. So the Hugh Lane, who was our nominal chairman, called us all together, and he said, we're going to have to either do something this election, or we're going to have to disband the PAC, because we'd run a couple of races that weren't as well run and weren't as successful. And we all agreed that we needed to make this a big push, and this was sort of the moment of truth. So the good news is we got somebody who knew what he was doing, and she, by the way, on electoral politics, and that was Brady Quirkard, who is a superstar. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of political consultants, and I can tell you that very few of them deliver what they tell you they're going to deliver. I mean, and Brady is one of the few who does, and he's also got tremendous integrity. And then Amber Allen and Jillian Hollingsworth were working to kind of keep the back office going.
Okay.
So we had a great team, and why it should take us an round of elections to learn that, because I should have known. We should have known it, having been involved with Conservation League for 30 years. But we got great staff members, and we have a good board, which we're going to expand, by the way, and just decided that, again, this was the time to make the big change that needed to be made, but also aware that just getting good people elected isn't enough. We've got to support them in a number of ways. One, we've got to provide, as many of these groups like Preservation Society and others do, the dissemination of information about these issues to their members. and the mobilization of those people, because even the best council members can't succeed unless they have their public behind them. And so we will be doing that. But also, to the extent they may need help even with ordinances that need to be drafted, or identifying sources of money for flooding, which I've spent a lot of time doing.
Right.
We're going to help them that way too. So we're going to be there as most of these PACs are. You know, the Chamber of Commerce PAC doesn't just appear for the elections and then vanish. The Chamber is always around pushing their issues, and we're going to do the same thing.
Same thing. You talk about obviously being backed by the public as far as the council members are concerned. The new ones coming in, do they understand it takes 7 votes to get anything passed?
I think so. I think they do. I think the city council is a kind of strange animal because it's big. You know, with county council, you've got 9 votes.
Right.
You've got 13, including the mayor. And so it really does take more finesse and I think diplomacy to get things done. And interestingly, for 40 years, Mayor Riley had really mastered the art of getting things done. I didn't agree with a number of things he did, but he was masterful at setting the stage for getting the right votes out of council. And these council members need to understand that and take a lesson from him, as does Mayor Tecklenburg.
I was going to ask, does he understand the master?
He really needs to read the book by Brian about Mayor Riley, because you know, he was up there with, you know, Lyndon Johnson and others in terms of being able to pull groups together and get them to move in the same direction.
Yeah. And I want to go back, because you just mentioned this just a second ago, but you told Brian Hicks in the Post-Reporter, you said this quote, "The voters were clearly not satisfied with the current behavior of council, but what that means is not 100% clear." The current behavior on council, what is that?
Well, I think, and I tell you, my friend Steve Bailey, who I just think the world of, has written a number of articles about this, and particularly focused on and sent me an email, and he said, "You've got to listen to the last hour of this council meeting because you will not believe it." And the last hour, this is in August,
right,
of that council meeting was chaos. It was people attacking Mayor Tecklenburg making a recommendation to do thus and such, and then having this, you know, almost riot on the council that accomplished nothing. You know, basically just meant nothing happened. But it was totally unproductive. And that's where I think this new council does understand that civility and diplomacy and teamwork is going to be a critical part of the next 4 years.
4 years. Let me reread your quote. It says, "The voters were clearly not satisfied with the current behavior of council, but what that means is not 100% clear." Is it clear now?
Well, it's clear now. Yeah, it's clear. I mean, the voters, I will say, and thank you voters, because I think they were more perceptive than perhaps we worried they would be. You know, when things don't happen, it's not always obvious why they don't happen. I mean, I use the bus rapid transit system. What's going on there? I mean, we approved the money for that, $200 million of half-cent sales tax, and we are now almost a decade, not quite, but we're getting up there in terms of half a decade anyway, into the planning process. That's not acceptable. I mean, it's not acceptable that it takes 5 years or 10 years to get a bus running up and down Rivers Avenue and down Meeting Street to downtown Charleston. It's just not acceptable, and no council member should allow that to happen. I'll give you an analogy of when that sort of thing was about to happen, and actually it's a much more serious permitting process. When the harbor deepening project
Right.
started. And the Corps of Engineers said our normal timeline is about 10 years to do an environmental impact statement to beginning the project.
Sure.
And the Ports Authority understandably said, we can't wait that long. We've got customers who want to bring bigger ships in, and it'll make us less competitive and all that. And regardless of, the implications for a minute of how big we get as a port, it made sense that we not delay that project, because everyone had pretty much agreed that it made sense and they were going to do it in as environmentally responsible way as possible. So the Ports Authority, instead of wringing their hands and saying, oh, we can't move this along for another 10 years, a la County Council and the Bus Rapid Transit, they said, we want to go to the Corps, to DC, and ask for an expedited environmental impact statement. And they did. They sent a delegation up, and then they called and wrote other people, entities who weighed in on it, like the Conservation League, and said, would you send a letter endorsing an expedited environmental impact statement? And we did, because, as I say, most people had the opinions and points of view were already out there. They were in the record. It didn't help to delay things. Actually, it hurt the environmental cause, because part of the mitigation for that was a very important fund that was created that helped protect some of the historic Cooper River plantations.
Right.
So anyway, so I use that just as an example of a case where leaders, in the case of the Ports Authority, Jim Newsom and the board, said, we will not sit idly by and let this process drag us down for a decade. That same type of leadership we need to see on county council. Someone needs to say, we will expedite the permit for the bus rapid transit system. We will make it as efficient as possible, and we will get this thing up and running, because the people who will benefit from it need it right now. They don't, it's not 10 years from now or even 5 years from now. They need to have a reliable, functional transit right now.
Right now, you talk a lot about county council in this particular meeting, and I want to go to one of the folks who were going up against one of your candidates, and that is Keith Waring. He basically told obviously Brian Hicks of the Post-Courier that it's likely will be harder for the Livability PAC to influence elections in county council districts, which are larger, and during the 2020 election, when turnouts will be much higher. But anyone who ignores the group, he says, does it at their own peril. Their own peril.
Well, I was frankly flattered with Keith Waring's comments. I thought he was very gracious about the work of the PAC, even though we didn't endorse him. But and definitely, obviously, look forward to working with him. I mean, that's a starting point. But I think the same kinds of problems exist with county council. You've got the same, to some extent, gridlock, inertia, lack of motivation on the part of the council members to actually accomplish things, to get things up and running, as witnessed, as I said, by this bus rapid transit program. But not only that, the county council was the one in the driver's seat, so to speak, for the bike lane, and they did move forward. They approved funding for it, but then they didn't do anything to make it happen. So I think that the next step is to see, and actually we've got a year. I mean, things can happen in a year we hope they will happen on county council that may lead us to conclude that this county council is actually motivated to solve these problems. I mean, they have not been as effective as they should have been, and as I said, county council and city council have complementary roles that have to be accomplished in conjunction with one another. It's not they do this and we do that. It's we both have a role in this. The half-cent sales tax, for example, is a county fund But the city is benefiting from the use of that. And so that's why they need to work together. And it's just a cop-out to say, well, that's their job, not our job. So I think there's a long way of saying that I'm hopeful that I think we will see a sharper focus by council on outcomes this next year. And I also am hopeful that we'll get some candidates to run who will be more motivated to develop solutions rather than just sort of grandstanding.
And let me go back to that paragraph where it says it's likely it will be harder for the Livability PAC to influence elections in county council districts, which are larger, and during the 2020 election, when turnout will be much higher. How could you beat Summey? How could you beat Brantley Moody? How could you beat Vic Rawle in 2020?
They're not that big. I mean, they are bigger, but they're not that big. The county is the biggest part of the county. You think about it, the county is Mount Pleasant,
Right.
downtown,
Right.
Charleston,
Sure.
Mannings Island,
Right.
and North Charleston.
Right.
And not even all of the city of Charleston, because Daniel Allen is in Berkeley County.
Technically.
So it is bigger, but it's not so big that people don't know who their county council members are, and they don't know that they're responsible for accomplishing certain things. That's really the key. We've got like I say, we like the council candidates, they will be engaged in trying to get their message out to as many people as they can, and we'll be doing it roughly the same way they will. We'll be using social media, we'll use mailers, we'll have maybe even a little television, we'll be we'll have candidate fora. So anyway, we're looking forward to it.
Can I host it?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. You would be the best. I hope you will.
That's great. And obviously, there was a lot of talk during this entire election and even a runoff about dark money.
Yeah.
How does the Livability PAC look at that now?
Well, we are a 501c3 we are a 501c3 a PAC. We were C4. Excuse me. Is anybody out there?
Sure.
What is he talking about? And we report just like the candidates do. All of our donors are reported to the State Election Commission. You can go online and you can look up Ross Appel's donors and you can look our donors up.
Sure.
And so, and I think that's only appropriate. And I will also say that Brady was our leader, Brady Quirk Garvin, was very focused on being transparent. I mean, according to the law, and I'm glad we did. I don't see anything, I don't really see the benefit of the dark money tax. They only draw the ire and suspicion of people, especially in small communities.
Okay.
And I think that being transparent is just nothing but beneficial. You get to see who believes in these candidates. And if you might see, for example, people supporting them that you should know because they may have a commercial interest in the candidate winning. And you should know that. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that's something we all should know as voters.
Now, let me go back and ask a repetitive question. How many votes do you have now on city council?
I don't know. I think we've got of people who are oriented towards solving these problems. I mean, we've got a great majority who are on the same wavelength. But I think more importantly than the vote number is the dynamic on the council. I think we've got people on the council now who are really, again, oriented towards solutions rather than obstructionism, and that is the difference. I think I take Keith Waring as an example. Okay. He's not anti-livability. He's not going to be out there beating the drum for development in wetlands or anything like that. But I think that he now has colleagues who he can work with on those issues in a way that he didn't before. There was a lot more tension and a lot more divisiveness on council, and I think most of that is gone.
I have to ask this, and I'm pretty sure you might not want to comment on it right now. But earlier in the Livability PAC, as far as endorsing candidates, you all did endorse Angela Drake.
Right.
Why now did you all disinvite your endorsement of her?
Well, that was, and I don't mind commenting on it. I've known Angela for a long time, and I admired what she did in the community, working up in Ansonboro,
right.
And I like her. But what we had as a sort of baseline is that, pretty much there weren't any, I don't want to say skeletons in the closet, but, we weren't surprised by finding something out about a candidate that would not be viewed well by either the PAC members or the voters. And she had, initially she had that lien against her from the IRS, which she cleared up, to her credit. And I hope she will get back into the arena. But at the time, we didn't know it. And then when we found out about it, I think the PAC members felt that it would be just better to have just basically have no position in that race. Than endorse her.
What requirements did you all require of your endorsed candidates?
Well, we interviewed them. We looked at the record of what they've done in the community. And again, Angela had done a lot of things as Marie has. I don't know her, by the way. I haven't met her, but I want to meet her. But and so involvement in the community, how articulate he or she was in the interviews, how much he or she seemed to know about the particulars of the issue, and also just at some level you kind of make a judgment. And also on the other side, you've got is the opponent terrible or not too good or pretty good? You can't know that a lot, especially in races where you've got two. In that case, you've got two candidates, neither of whom is served. You really don't. It's harder to make a judgment because you don't have a record there. But we looked at the record, and we looked at answers, and we looked at other community involvement metrics, and did the best we could do.
You talk about good, not so good, and brilliant. And I'm paraphrasing. Why wasn't Reverend Christian King brilliant as far as getting the vote out, as far as winning that race?
She was brilliant. She didn't raise enough money. She didn't really have much of a fundraising base, and so I don't know. I didn't look at the final number. Maybe it's not in yet, but I'm guessing she raised less than $5,000. And but she was a very energetic campaigner and ran a great campaign. The ground campaign. That's sort of like the gold standard for a great candidate is to run a ground campaign, and she did a great job. But you've got Keith Waring, who's a multi-term incumbent. He knows he's from this area. People know him, right. and that was a tough hill to climb. But she did a very credible job, I think.
She's a great lady. I know her very well.
Yeah.
And going forth, the Livability PAC, will you all actually get involved with statewide races?
No, because that's where the conservation voters of South Carolina is active. We'll be there. They're working on the state, senate, and house races and governors.
Okay.
So yeah.
And how would you describe the Livability PAC in 2 years from now, sitting here?
Well, I hope we're going to be considered the most positive thing that ever came along, that helped break the gridlock and get people moving and pulling together on the common challenges that we face. That's what I hope.
Now, if these particular candidates that you endorse don't break the gridlock, then what?
Well, we'll go back to Plan A, but we'll deal with that when we get there. But we want to help them. We're not just going to say go do good. We're going to say what can we do to help you.
Which one of those candidates that you all endorse resembles a Dana Beach that could have ran for mayor or city council?
I think a lot of people would say, thank God none of them did. No, I don't know. I mean, one thing I guess if I have an attribute that's been positive, my family would disagree with all of this, but I just, just being willing to work hard,
Okay.
because this is, there's not a lot of glamour to this stuff. I mean, you go to the meetings and you deal with people whose pipes are broken or, their drains are stopped up or whatever. I mean, that's not glamorous, but got to be done. My daughter works for the city of New York in the environmental protection arena, which basically means she's in the Office of Management and Budget, but she oversees the sewer and water department. If somebody doesn't do that, we're in big trouble. It's not glamorous, but somebody's got to do it.
Yes, sir. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, Dana Beach, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you, Quintin, again for everything,
Yes,
for
sir.
coming and also just doing this public service.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're welcome anytime.
Yeah.